morning, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Hot Topics. As always, Cloney and myself are so excited to welcome you, as well as a fantastic guest, to our conversation tonight. And we're really looking forward to what we're going to get into tonight as part of our COVID-19 and the Christian series. We've had some incredible episodes so far as we discussed what COVID-19 means for us and how we respond ethically to the pandemic that is happening in our country and in the world at the moment. And so tonight we've got another special guest. We've got Bishop Maponga, who's joining us, and we're really looking forward to some of the things that you're going to bring into this conversation tonight. So maybe before we kick off, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
My name is Maponga Joshua. I come from an organization called Farmers of Thought, where we are constantly involved in helping the African child to own estate, the estate of the mind, where lots of plantation is happening. The question is, who is planting in that field and what quality of fruit are we getting out? The second field of plantation is our reproduction, posterity, creating legacies for the future. The question is, where are you planting and who is planting in your field and what quality of fruit are you producing? This talks to your children. The third piece of estate is the land. Before you can marry and make my girl pregnant, you need to make the land pregnant. If you don't have means of production, you don't have a right to reproduction. So basically, we're in an estate of intellectual and social re-engineering, where we're constantly pushing boundaries and allowing the African to stop being a victim always, but start taking responsibility. You can't be looking for farms and you can't plant a small little flower at the back of your house. So agriculture for me is important, but I'm using agriculture as a concept of thinking. The same methods that you use for planting, watering, trimming, and harvesting. And we take that to psychological space and see how an African can actually begin to process the means of agriculture as a means of production.
Sure. Sounds amazing.
Indeed. Thank you so much. So, Bishop, we're going to kick straight right into the conversation. The first thing we want to find out from you is, very often when people speak about the ongoing pandemic, there is always the temptation to draw parallels between the pandemic and the idea of God punishing people before the end of the world, that it precedes something greater, which is the end of the world. And there is that temptation then to also say that the vaccine could be an element of 666 that was spoken about in Revelations. What are your thoughts on this, and how then does it impact our response to the pandemic?
Hi, my name is Zinam Simang, and one of the myths that I've heard about Corona, well, there are many myths about them actually that are going around, but one in particular that I think has struck a chord in me and our family is the fact that it targets mostly people who have underlying conditions already. And yeah, it's a bit nerve-wracking if maybe you don't know that you have something that is a condition that could affect your experience with COVID. So, yeah.
Okay, I'd say in the beginning there were actually quite a few myths going around, like supposedly you could get it from your pets.
Which now they've shown that there was only one case, which was in China. It was a mild case, so they're saying that you can't get it from your pets at this stage.
So you're safe with them. There was also home remedies going around, saying if you took zinc and vitamin C, and I think there was some other stuff as well.
Well, they said vitamin A. They also spoke about chloroquine. None of these things are a cure for the COVID. Obviously, to boost your immune system, the vitamins and the zinc, etc. help, but there's no cure for it yet.
There was also about temperature playing a role, like it doesn't survive in hot weather and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we were led to sort of believe that in extreme sort of hot weather it wasn't going to survive. If you left your car shut up and everything, it wasn't going to survive. But at this stage, they're saying the temperature doesn't play a role. The cold or the heat, it lives through it.
So those were just some of the myths that we heard about.
I've spoken to people who believe that COVID-19 as a whole has been completely exaggerated, that the numbers have been faked and have been upped to increase the fear amongst the population. I've also spoken to people who believe that the whole thing is a government plan to control population. There's the 5G myth, that it's being created by 5G, which is a cellular network. And I even had a friend of mine sincerely ask me if I thought that taking the vaccine for COVID-19 would be one step closer to what the Bible calls the mark of the beast, which is quite a spectrum of myth to consider.
first comment I would give is the negligence of the Christian community. We host 60% in some certain countries, 70 to 80% Christian communities in our countries. That means 60% of all doctors are Christian. That means 60% of politicians are Christians. That means 60% of prisoners are Christian. If you understand that, automatically it says the Christian community medical team, firstly, if they could gather together, we should be having Christian conversation. Unfortunately, they are members on a Sunday and they become civil servants from Monday to Friday. At the end of the day, we don't have an Afrocentric, a Christian-based response to the pandemic. That, I call that negligence of the highest order. Secondly, it is to understand that the pandemic could be a social ill with its own politics, with its own economics. But now hope and explanation of the pandemic is being sought for in the Christian space. And the Christian space is underpinned by theology. And the theology under that space is the eschatology, which is the sixth doctrine on systematic theology, which either speaks of life after death, the pandemics that will be coming, with special emphasis on the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation in terms of the plagues and etc. The question is, has our interpretation of that eschatology, our explanation of that apocalyptic literature been accurate enough, or we have become, whistleblowers only when it is convenient? Now that the pandemic is here, people are now perusing their Bible to find what is there. What are the solutions that are there? And hence, from the eschatological view, many Christians are despondent because now they're saying, why bother about the pandemic? The Bible already says it. It must be fulfilled. So the ideology is that of escape theology. We're going to disappear from here. Let's do nothing about it. Instead of us looking and say there's a pandemic, we have a solution amongst us. Can we begin to look for medicines? Can we begin to do vaccines as Christians? Can we begin to respond? And if we believed in the Bible, then why are we not ready? We are busy building cathedrals, investing in orphanages and etc. And you say that's social business. But to change a community, you need banks, you need pharmaceutical companies, you need manufacturing platforms, you need farms. And as a Christian church, then you can respond positively when the pandemic is at the door. I'm sorry to say this. I know it's a Christian space. We've been found with our pens down, sleeping around, telling people in a little while we're going home, amazing grace, amazing grace. Has this become amazing now? So we have been theologically educated, but we have been socially ill-equipped.
I love what you speak about when you speak about the escapist theology, how we like to say, well, there's pretty much nothing we can do about it, so we're going to just kind of ride this wave until whatever happens. And we like to, as Christians, like you said, we've neglected to interpret the scriptures properly. And so we say that this is a sign of the times, it's a sign of the new world order that's coming in. And so we kind of either resign ourselves to it, to say, this is the way we have to now go until the end of the world. Or we kind of go, well, we're not going to submit to this new world order. So I've heard a lot of people saying that COVID and the procedures and the sanitizing and the masks, that is this imposition of a new world order that is the sign, and then the vaccine is the mark of the beast. And so how do we take this as Christians now without having this idea of there's nothing we can do, but at the same time we've got this wrestle with this very subtle,
There's a passage of scripture where Yeshua himself, or Jesus as you please, admits that the prince of this world, or the king of this world, meaning the devil. So it's one thing to say he's got the whole world in his hand, but the Messiah himself, when he came down, he says there's a king in this world, and the king of this world is the devil himself. So in as much as we want to look for positions, the question is, has the political system, the academic system, the cultural system, the business systems, have they been honest in dealing with us in the past? Do we have faith in the system that has been brewing for the past 6,000 years? Do we have confidence in the system that is creating weapons to be shooting and killing each other? We're not even talking about the pandemic yet. Do we have confidence in a system that is robbing the poor, enriching the rich? Do we have faith in the system that disenfranchises people and constantly is found in abortions. It is found in all sorts of weird paranormal behaviors that are being encouraged as normal behaviors. Do we have confidence in the system so far from our entire livelihood, so that by the time a pandemic comes, do you have confidence that this system, actually for the first time in history, now they have an interest with the lives of the people? The world is in danger. And the same people, it's not conspiracy. Bill Gates, United Nations, and many other organizations. I've heard this as early as 1980s when I was at university. The world is being overpopulated. The resources are not enough for everybody. We need to reduce population. Contraception came here in the 60s, in the 70s. People were being put on contraception and etc. to reduce the population. And so did that work? Yes, to an extent, but in some certain cases, the population is still on the rise. So it is a fact that you will find in the United Nations, and gazetted and minuted, and strategies have been put, and millions, if not billions, have been invested to drive this agenda. Now, does Corona come in now, and for the first time you are worried that the human population is being wiped off when all along you've been planning to reduce them? It's a question that everyone needs to think about. That's not conspiracy. That's a fact which is diarized in the United Nations, and all governments have an agenda for managing human population.
Now, Bishop, I like the point you're raising around the mistrust, that people can't find it very difficult to trust the powers that be. We've had examples we've seen genocides. You look through history, Australia, America, Africa,
Congo,
Namibia, Congo. We've got all these genocides that have happened. But also, another thing that people seem to be also raising is why are African bioethics being excluded in our response to the pandemic? There are all these mistrusts. But now the challenge now is then, as one who understands that whether this was intentional or unintentional, how I engage my fellow man might put them in danger. I've got then this responsibility to say, I do not trust the system, but at the same time, I've got a responsibility to my fellow men. How then do I hold this tension?
The question you're asking is founded on our ethical behavior. The question is, what is the center of that ethical education? Is it a government responsibility? Is it an academic responsibility? Is it a church responsibility? Or it is a social and family responsibility? Well, that's where you teach how people must respond to a system. Now, our education system has become an escape. It has become a passport to disappear from yourself and move into quote-unquote civilization. And within that, there are expected outcomes and expected behaviors. So when you're asking how should you respond, the question is, I respond as who? I respond as what? And when I respond, does the system acknowledge, accommodate, tolerate that response? So much of what we're dealing with right now is social conditioning, where people are driving themselves towards a common understanding with the government, with the ministers, with the ministries, and the community must rally around behind one idea and one leader who is in front. Particularly in South Africa, for example, boom, there's a pandemic. We don't have toilets, we don't have streets, we don't have everything. But within one morning, 500 billion can be sourced out. I don't remember any parliament, maybe you do, when they sit in parliament to agree where to go and get the money, how the money will be sourced, and how the money will be used. I don't remember any parliament. I've heard other parliaments where people are shouting each other, out of order, comrade, out of order, debating about how to put on their wigs and weaves and paint their nails. When it comes to critical issues, when the community and the parliament must come out now and begin to have a conversation of where are we going to get the money? How are we going to administer this money? Those issues, one man and a few people, let's say 140 people, are making a decision for the 52 million. And you're asking me, how do we respond? Respond to what? When the people who are sitting in front have no interest either with their own parliament or the people at the back, how do we respond? We're not supposed to respond. We're supposed to comply.
Which obviously makes it difficult And there's also the mistrust in Bishop that is also fueled by the fact that we have systems. So I remember listening to one conversation where the conversation was on the difficulty to reconcile the virus with our oral tradition, because we have not really documented our oral tradition, and which then makes it difficult to reconcile it to herbs that would have been used by our forefathers. And then people continue to say, you guys don't want to do this work, therefore why should we trust these solutions that you are bringing in for the virus? Because clearly there might be another agenda, because we've been taught, history teaches us not to easily trust pharmaceutical industry.
As a point of departure, 25 years later, South Africa is free, and yet your indigenous healing department is still gazetted as a witchcraft act, number one. So there's no change from apartheid to modern day. 2, 25 years later, Wits University is 2 kilometers away from Faraday. Faraday is a place where they are selling all these traditional medicines. There's not been a single interest to move the students from their concrete walls to those indigenous people and identify these herbs, bring them to the laboratories, find the active ingredients, begin to create generic, local, indigenous medicines. This means that the African now understands the processes. For example, how do you extract chlorophyll from the leaves? You crush them, you pour some alcohol on them, then under small temperature, alcohol evaporates, there you remain with the active ingredients, then do your testing. It's right there. So all those herbs that are sitting in the parks there can be taken into the laboratories and create a local solution. But our own people have been taught not to trust their own things. They've been taught to trust the other. And by trusting the other, what makes you now wake up 25 years later and say we want to use Mhlonyana? Of the 500 billion that was sourced and advice from a fool, had they taken 2 billion, 2 out of 500, you can eat the 498. Just take 2 billion and do a proper research on Mhlonyana, like Madagascar did. Pick up those shrubs, look around them, find out what is there, Atamasia, whatever they call it. Try and get the Madagascar one, come up with the local indigenous stuff, a bit of fix and gum tree leaves, and give us the solution. We don't need to get sick to get healed. Tell us how to protect ourselves before we can get sick, but we don't have confidence in that. And the last punchline, religious organizations have equally must account also for the blood that is in their hands. Because from our pulpits, we're the ones who tell people that indigenous things are devilish, they're evil, there is Satan in here, they're demons, and what and what. So are you telling me that we have lived with demons all along? Are you telling me that when I'm eating vegetables and ginger, I'm eating demons? But subtly this message of mistrust of our indigenous things has been inserted. Not everything that is African is evil. Not everything that is African is righteous. Not everything that is European is evil. Not everything that is European is righteous. A wise man, therefore, you take the good in each and map up a society that respects its indigenous knowledge, harvest it and package it and respond to the ills that are in the community.
So one of the things, Bishop, that you just spoke about is then, instead of wanting to heal us, tell us what to eat, so that we do not, it's not this intervention. Suddenly I'm sick and now you want to give me a vaccine. I've also heard in one of your talks where you speak about this idea of saying, if we had a good way of life, we might have not been in the crisis that we actually find ourselves in, because our immune systems would have been built up. And believe it or not, I've actually seen it in my own household where we had symptoms of corona, but my son's day mom, who is from Lesotho, was the one person whose life was normal. All of us were running to the bathroom and experiencing all these symptoms, but all she had was a cough, a very light cough. And it brings us then back to that point that her immune system is built up because of the stuff she grows up eating. Now, I wanted to come now to the point of saying, would you then say there is merit in interpreting such pandemics as things that are not natural, as some would like to suggest, that this is not natural evolution, but it is a way of life where we are meant to live in harmony with the creation around us, where it enables our well-being, and we also look after it that has been disrupted.
Very good question. We would be fools if we think that this is the first pandemic that has hit the world. We have been through syphilis, we have been through yellow fevers, we have been through chicken pox, we have been through polio, we are still struggling with malaria, Ebola is on the door, 30% of Africa is infected with HIV and things of that nature. And all of these things, unfortunately speaking, they have not been a priority to the pharmaceutical companies. You call me conspiracy or whatever, I don't mind. But they have not been of priority because they have not been affected by these issues. You cannot tell me that 32 years later, we still have HIV and there's no solution. You can be given lifetime drugs. Why lifetime drugs? When this one comes within a space of 4 months, we are able to come up with a vaccine and have all mutations and etc. vaccines prepared. Only last week I discovered the vaccines were developed as early as 2002 in preparation for this. So where the investor, where the economist, where the pharmacists have an interest, they will expedite the process, break their own rules, and deliver what is wanted. Africa right now is dying more from starvation and hunger. Vaccines are not an issue at all. And if you look around what is killing people, it is the simple fact that they've been extracted away from their normal way of life. Here we are living in kitchens, in tin houses, in town, drinking sewage water flowing out of our houses. An old woman living in Mtuba in her grass hut, eating from the herbs and etc., has a far better chance of surviving and living in what you might want to call a poor environment, but healthy environment, than the one who is in the urban area, who now has access to sugar, Kentuckys, pizzas, and etc., and they cannot even afford that, increasing on crime and other issues, simply looking at the factor that they are no longer plowing their fields and they don't have access to the resources which actually give them the health that they need. A human being in harmony with nature, my definition of civilization.
I want to jump on that, the idea of human being in harmony with nature. And if we take this back to some conspiracy theories, I've heard people say that it's things like this is a result of adaptation, and then they link it to the Christian space to say because we haven't treated nature as we should as Christians, we haven't been good stewards of creation. And so either they say, and so this is God's punishment, or they say, because we haven't been good stewards, evolution, adaptation has taken its course, and so it's almost, you do this, you get a slap on the wrist here. What do you think of this?
We must not even put God on the equation when it comes to such issues. Human beings are capable of killing themselves without God. Nuclear weapons, look at Hiroshima, look at Afghanistan, look at Iran, look at Libya, look at Congo. Look at slave trade, 25 million, 20 million over there, another millions. To date, as of April, when I last checked the statistics, they had already done 82 million abortions. Now, and you're telling me, God, because 135 people are infected with corona, you're telling me, God, because 1.2 million people have corona, you look at 30, 40, 50,000 total number of deaths in this thing and total number of deaths in abortions. Tell me who is killing more people? God. So let's not blackmail God because of our own evil appetite for destroying ourselves. We are capable as human beings to destroy ourselves. We don't even need the devil in some certain cases. You just need an evil leader.
I think it's 100% what you're saying there. It's so brilliant to think that at times in our Christian walk, we are suddenly so interested in God. And there are so many times where we just are not interested. You know, some of the examples that you've given us there, where we've gone and lived our life, and then suddenly something happens, whether it's cause and effect or if it's human made, then suddenly we're interested in God. But the rest of the time,
And
we're
again,
not.
while you are saying that, remember that 60% of the nurses and doctors conducting these abortions are Christians. They're Christians, because the law makes you take a vow when someone has made a decision and etc. blah blah blah. So it's us, it's we, the Christian community. Let's take some responsibility for once. The 60% of our governments are Christians. These decisions are being made in our eyes. It's not like we're absent. We are present, but when we get into these spaces, we take our belief system, we take our Christianity, we leave it in the boot of the car. Jobs bale. I'm just working, I'm doing what I'm expected to do. The question is, what are the consequences of people who are in power who don't have a good moral standing and understanding what life and the sanctity of life is all about? So let's take responsibility, particularly we, the 60%.
So, Bishop, maybe as we head towards our closing, I would then want to find out from you, what exactly does it mean to respond as a Christian to this pandemic? We've, very recently, we had a prayer from a individual who does not say Ijobi Isbali, but brings his prophetic witness to the job. You know, and I know that in my own circles we're very divided around the Chief Justice praying during his induction to say, Chief, we are not a religious state, you know, we are a secular state. But also we had then the recent prayer where the prayer was for any vaccine that is not from God, that is of the devil, to burn. And then people then drew parallels between that and the recent fire outbreak at one pharmaceutical company that was developing a vaccine in India. You know, and people drew that parallel, and for some people then their understanding of a Christian ethical response to the pandemic is exactly that, saying this could be from the devil. And I even had someone go on to the point of saying, I am going on a mask protest because this is from the devil, it is not of God, which in my own lens was not ethical, because even when I am in a war where I've got questions, I still have a responsibility to protect fellow humans. What is your thought on that?
The 60%, I keep on saying that, must account as to how South African government in particular ends up coming up with a policy that we are a non-religious organization. If democracy was a reality, that the votes of the people shall rule. Therefore, if we say those who want this, let's raise our hands, and hands are raised. Those who don't want this show the same sign, and hands are raised. How did we end up in this space? My gripe with Advocate Mukhweng is that he is the Chief Justice of the system. He sits on the ceiling of a system. And for the first time, I think he has come face to face with the monster that has employed him. Instead of worrying about what people are responding to what Mukhweng did, my honest opinion is, how do we change that constitution from a non-religious constitution to give it some sort of preeminence to the majority that are in an environment? Look at the Middle East, look at India, look at China, and etc., where the dominant culture to preserve themselves have opted to run their country on the basis of their own regulations. That's where the Sharia care law comes in. That's where the Chinese people say, we don't want Bibles here, we don't want what, because they want to run their system in a certain way. And remember one thing, of course, that economics is not religious. They don't have God, but they're doing well economically. So when you come up to this environment of a man now taking his religion into a space where the government has actually agreed that we're a non-religious organization, we're a non-religious government, then they're going to take a rep to Mukhweng for using his religious biases in an environment that is actually demarcated as a non-religious environment. So for me, it's not about what Mukhweng did, it's the constitution which is now responding to individual choices and individual freedom. Question: does the system accommodate individual freedom and individual expression? Answer: no. By being non-religious, we don't tolerate anyone projecting their religion over the other. The only time it's convenient is when we want your ethics and morality. Then we say, please can you raise your hand and put your hand on the Bible. After that, please keep that Bible away. But if this is the source of my ethics, then why can't I use it after that? Those are the issues that you guys in the country must begin to grapple with and really question. That how do you have a constitution that is vowed upon using either the Quran or the Bible, yet you don't want the same text to become the pretext and the suffix and the one on which the precepts of behavior are founded upon?
Thank you, Bishop. And I think that's where we're going to close it for today. But thank you so much, Bishop Mabonga. I hope that is food for thought for everyone that is at home. But we also understand that there's so much to grapple with. And what we hope to do through these conversations is to inspire and equip everyone at home to engage issues of ethics critically and not just by looking to a line and paraphrasing that. But we hope that you engage critically with your mind, your heart, and your hands. Thank you so much. See you next week, same time, same place.